The NBA season has come to an end for the Toronto Raptors, and I think it's fair to say it was a disappointing one. And sure, there was some positives to sprinkle in there, but overall, where did things go wrong for this team? Let's get into it. For NBA content dedicated to the Toronto Raptors, you've got to be subscribed right here to Amateur Sports and drop a like if you enjoyed this one along the way, because today we're recapping the season that was for the Raptors. And sure, you could look at things like, hey, the preseason projections for wins for the Raptors was 29.5. In the end, they win 30 games. They go 30-52. But I think really when you look at any situation where like the ultimate goal of playing basketball is to win games. And sure, teams have maybe different priorities because at a certain point you start to tank. But to start the season for the Raptors, they were trying to win games. They were trying to see how far they could push themselves, how many wins they could get, and maybe if they could get themselves into the playoff picture. And that didn't quite materialize. They had a really poor start of the season. The schedule did lighten up near the end of the season. And yes, they were playing a lot of tanking teams at the end of the season where they did win games, but 30 wins still feels like a bit of a relative disappointment for the team. And I think at the start of the season, I would have guessed this team was going to win around 30 games. So it's how disappointing could it be? It's kind of what you expected it to be. I think the manner in which it happened is disappointing because they kind of stockpiled these wins again near the end of the season. And it just felt like such a long season because of how poor things were for the Raptors at the start of the year. So I want to cover the three things I found the most disappointing about the Raptors that kind of went into this season spiraling a little bit out of control before it even really got going for this team. And the first thing that I wanted to cover here is, unfortunately, Scottie Barnes. I don't think it was a bad decision from the Raptors to see what it looked like with Scottie Barnes at the helm of the offense. And I'll preface this by saying I'm still a big Scottie Barnes fan. I'm still a big believer in Scottie Barnes, but tasking him with being the real leader on the offense, the real go-to player in offense, just didn't really work. Not blaming anybody for that, not blaming the front office, not blaming coaching, not even really blaming Scottie Barnes, but evidently this is a player who had a ton of ability, who had made an all-star team last year, who we thought, let's see what he can do when given this opportunity. Obviously, like I said, it's disappointing when your team doesn't make the playoffs and doesn't win a ton of games, but we kind of knew that wasn't probably going to happen for the Raptors this season, so why not see what it looks like with Scottie Barnes at the helm of the offense, leading the offense? And unfortunately, it was a little bit of a down year for the player. We were just expecting a whole lot more. Yes, he may have averaged 19.3 points per game, which is honestly a little bit less than last season when he averaged 19.9, but 90.3 is still pretty good. He did average 5.8 assists, which is a little bit down from last year, 7.7 rebounds, again, a little bit down from last year, though his minutes dropped a little bit this year because I think later on in the season, he was getting a lot less play time compared to last season when he was injured for the tanking phase of the season. So not going to put a ton of stock into those numbers dropping very slightly. There was a lot of good for Scottie Barnes in rebounding and assists and his defense, which was phenomenal this season. But the efficiency, there was a big problem this year. His field goal percentage this season was 44.6, and his three-point percentage was 27.1. Led up to a true shooting percentage of 52.3. A true shooting percentage under 55 is alarming. We're well under that at this point here. 52.3, yeah. That's something that's going to need a lot of work and a lot of fine-tuning. I think the biggest area that wasn't clicking, the most glaring area was definitely the three-point percentage, which has gone from 34 all the way down to 27. That's definitely a problem. That definitely causes issues to your true shooting percentage, which measures your efficiency across two-pointers, three-pointers, and free throws. And the true shooting percentage is great because it values those three-pointers a little bit more because in the end, threes are worth more than two. But still, you can have a really good true shooting percentage being a decent three-point shooter and a really good finisher on twos. And I think that was part of the problem for Barnes. It's those almost ones you want to be automatic, those short hooks, those short push shots, just the short finishes near the rim in and around 3 feet. Those just weren't quite automatic for the guy, 3 to 5 feet, that you'd kind of expect to be in the fourth year of his career. So it just didn't really click for Barnes as the focal point of the offense. That doesn't mean he's not a terrific player. He showcased, second half of the season, the Raptors were fantastic on defense, and Barnes was the primary reason why the Raptors were so good on defense. I'm really excited to see what he looks like next year in that role, and looking forward to seeing him next year in an offensive role where he's maybe not quite the focal point of the opposition defense, and he can go back to the sort of role that helped make him an all-star just last season. But part of the reason Raptors didn't quite go beyond the expectations, certainly just not quite enough offensive punch from their number one guy. Still love Scottie, still think he's a great player, excited to see what he's going to do next season. But the second thing that really just didn't click for the Raptors this year, part of the reason why they struggled, it really started to sort itself out in the second half of the season, but the coaching at the start of the year was very, very poor for the Raptors. Like, end of season, I think there's a different outlook. The Raptors were winning games. We saw the developmental strides a lot further with guys like especially Jamal Shed, but maybe to a little bit of a lesser degree, Jacoby Walter and Jonathan Mobo. But the defense picking up end of this year really made this season look a whole lot better, because the start of the season, the Raptors were like quite a disaster on the defensive end of the floor. Like, they could not get stops. And one of the major reasons why that was the case is just their defensive scheme overall. Like, really blitzing on guards in the pick and roll on defense, like really playing high up on them defensively. And in the first half of the season, the Raptors were just getting absolutely destroyed by opposition bigs. That was a consistent trend. Opposition bigs were destroying the Raptors because the Raptors were taking away those sort of mid-range areas by playing up high on these point guards out of pick and roll situations and adjacent situations like that. And they were getting so exposed for those easy buckets at the rim. So many games, it felt like the Raptors were underprepared. They came out with the wrong schemes. Some games sending very aggressive double and triple teams against a guy when there's active shooters around who are going to knock down threes and just completely expose the Raptors' defense. It felt like so many times the Raptors were underprepared and would just put out the wrong game plan. And, you know, from the watch parties we do, it felt obvious sometimes to me watching and the rest of the people watching along with me in the chat saying, like, what are we like even trying to do here? It just felt like there was no plan on so many occasions near the start of the season for the Raptors. That alongside little in-game management stuff, end-of-game situations managed poorly overall, timeout plays not being managed well. Even like the usage of timeouts felt puzzling at times for the Raptors. It was just a lot of little things mixed in there offensively, combined with the lack of procedure overall on the defensive end that called guys like Pat Delaney into question, who's seemingly the guy who's leading this offense as one of the assistants for the Raptors. And, you know, when people talk about assistants, like, at the end of the day, the head coach is the head coach. He's got the final say. He's got to step in and do something. And whatever happened mid-season worked because the Raptors defense really picked it up. It helped to have the easier schedule, but very clearly visually the Raptors were better on the defensive end of the floor. But because they started the season so poorly in that endeavor, there was just not enough time to recover the season, and therefore we end up in this spot where, you know, we didn't really fully tank and we didn't really fully make a run for the playoffs. The third thing that really went wrong for the team this season, and maybe this is part of the reason why points 1 and 2 exists, maybe even especially point 2, is the injuries. The Raptors just never really got completely healthy until it was too late this season. Emmanuel quickly missed a lot of the start of the season. And then near the end of the season, when he got a good runway of games, he was healthy, he was starting to play really, really well again, showcasing what he could do, showcasing why there was so much promise for him last season. I think Raptors fans should still be big believers in Emmanuel quickly. RJ Barrett spent some time in and out of the lineup as well. Scottie Barnes had his fair share of injuries, you know, the eye injury, which left him out of some games. And even near the end of the season, Scottie Barnes wasn't completely healthy. And maybe that's also part of the reason why his stats dropped, because he was trying to get to 65 games and he wasn't at his best because he wasn't healthy. A lot of injuries for this team. They just never really got a healthy group until the second half of the season. Like, it took so long for the Raptors to even have their entire starting five available. Their starting five of Quickly, Barrett, Dick, Barnes, and Pirtle. Like, we were like halfway through the season before we actually got to see that starting five play together. And the entire offseason, we were looking forward to seeing, hey, we don't think we'll be that good, but like when we get these five on the floor together, like we can definitely cause some damage. But it was already kind of too late before we got all these guys on the floor together. And then Pirtle had some injuries, and Grady Dick missed the end of the season. So injuries did not help. Maybe they had worse injury luck than other teams, but you know, injuries are part of the game, something you do have to deal with. But yes, in the end, it felt like the Raptors got the short end of the stick as far as injuries are concerned. That did not help the team. So in the end, yes, you know, they they went over their win projection. It was 29.5, as I recall, the start of the season. They went over that. They got 30. A lot of that came near the end of the season, but the sentiment that I got and the sentiment I saw online and in comments and in the chat of my live streams was like, we were waiting for this season to be over. And I think we're waiting for it to be over because we know we have a big offseason ahead with still a good draft pick to use. And this team's got to attack next season. And we saw from the postseason press conferences, beyond the hot mics involved in that, the players know that the team has to be better next season, and the goal next year is making the playoffs.